I'm Art Matson, the village historian for Lynbrook, and we're here today at the Rockville Cemetery. This cemetery is, I guess you could say, home to many of the founding families of Lynbrook, Rockville Center, and East Rockaway. In fact, as you pan around a bit to the gravestones, you'll probably see names such as Ryder, Abrams, Pearsall, Rame, the names of the founding families of those three villages. But also here is behind me this monument, white marble. It was brought down from Sing Sing on the Hudson River, brought down here on a packet boat and placed here in 1840. It marks the gravesite of 139 victims of two shipwrecks, one in 1836 and another 2 months later in 1837. We've been celebrating this event and honoring the victims for now 20 years in a row. And welcome to this. We're about to begin in a few minutes. And thank you for watching.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow guards, AOH Collective Cemetery, Brendan, the navigator. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending this annual event. I'm happy and pleased to see you all could make it here today. I'd like to introduce Judy Griffin is here with us today, Assemblywoman. We have Dermot Kelly, President of the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick. I see Jim Burke, past President of New York State AOH. Marion Cronin, Vice President of Nassau County Ladies AOH. And John O'Brien, President of the AOH from Nassau County. Did I miss anybody here? Kevin Wesley, the radio station. Peter Bakley, past President of Nassau County AOH. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you my co-chairman, Art Matson, who is a historian, who is the guru, if you will, of this event here, who got us involved, the AOH involved years ago. Jim Burke and I were here trying to figure out how can we help out this one time dilapidated but historical place that we have now, if you will, resurrected, not only here but in Long Beach and in the future down in the Rockaways. Art?
Thank you, Andy Healy. Thank you very much. This year, 2019, marks the 20th anniversary of these ceremonies held to honor the 139 people, most of them Irish immigrants, individuals and families that are buried here and have been here for 180 years. Last year we held a ceremony in Long Beach, as you mentioned, Andy, where the beautiful marker, historical marker was unveiled there on the boardwalk. And that was to honor the 115 people, most again Irish immigrants, who froze to death on the deck of their ship only 200 yards offshore, so that their voices could be heard from shore, but they couldn't swim since it was January and it was only 3 degrees temperature. The water was practically frozen.
Now, 62 of those people are buried here. We don't know exactly where the burial is, but it's in the close proximity to this monument. Now, this year we wanted, as Andy said, to hold a ceremony out on the Rockaway Peninsula. And that's because we found that a map was discovered recently from 1840 that showed the precise location of the wreck. That's where 77 men, women, and children, 100 died altogether, but 77 of those people are buried here. They drowned when a wave overwhelmed the ship close to shore. And from that map, we know that the wreck took place 400 yards offshore. We know precisely. It's beach 125th Street. Ironically, that location is only a few blocks from where that Pan Am plane went down on the way to the Dominican Republic. And there's a memorial park just a few blocks away. But we'd like to put an historical marker there on the boardwalk in Rockaway. Of course, we'll have to get through the New York City authorities to do that, and maybe Judy Griffin can help us with an assemblywoman she knows, and Andy, you know her too, to get that done. Now, of course, the reason we did not hold that ceremony there, Andy, you've had several hospitalizations this year. I've had a mere 2, and we just couldn't quite pull it off, but we intend to do it next year. Also, that means that our landscaping here is been neglected for a year because we weren't supposed to be here. But we'll be taking care of that in the future. But we still have this still impressive marble monument, the tallest one in this cemetery, white marble, brought down the Hudson River. And the interesting thing about this white marble monument is it was paid for largely by the money that was taken from the bodies of the victims of those 2 shipwrecks. So those Irish immigrants had brought some money with them to establish themselves here in New York, and sadly it's used as a memorial for them. We also have these 3 fantastic historic markers here that tell the complete story of the wrecks, and these marble benches that we put in just 2 years ago. Yeah. Now, these 2 wrecks are incredibly important in Irish American history, as I've mentioned, but also in U.S. maritime history, because following these wrecks, people were so upset with the damage caused that they passed rules and regulations involving shipping and carrying passengers. And that affected the subsequent ships, because the famine was about to hit in Ireland, and we were about to get, in the 40s, hundreds of thousands of people coming. Not just hundreds, such as here, but hundreds of thousands. Very few accidents took place after these 2 wrecks. Very few. It became a safe passage. And the sacrifice of these people contributed to that safe passage. Judy, I guess, was your grandparents probably were helped by that. Yeah, and so many people that are here. Andy, all of the members of the Irish organizations. That safe passage made it so much easier for your antecedents to get here. And that is why this monument is on the National and New York State Register of Historic Places. It made it easy for me to get it on there because of the important effect that it had on maritime safety and on Irish American history. But there also have been some small things that happened, way under the radar, not like these grand things that I'm describing. On page 83 of my book, and that's what inspired this whole thing, was the writing of this. It's about the wrecks, and you'll find the names of the very few Irish survivors of the wreck of the Bristol, which happened out on Rockaway Beach. One was Michael Horan, a name that maybe doesn't ring a bell with you, but it does to anybody involved in the New York State Assembly for 35 years, I guess, up until 10 years ago. He was from County Offaly. Did I pronounce that correctly? County Offaly, which I believe is in the Midlands of Ireland.
between Dublin and Galway. Uh, Horan had sailed for New York, and he brought his 4 sons with him. He left his wife behind and his daughters because he planned to return to get them, which he did. But Horan and Sons somehow survived the wreck of the Mexico. As the water coursed down below decks, they must have struggled against that water somehow to get out and managed to get to shore. Now I know all this thanks to Jack McEnany. Jack McEnany is a historic name practically in New York Assembly, the former historian of the city of Albany, and as I say, assemblyman for probably 3 decades. Jack McEnany is the great-great-great-grandson of Jack Horn on his mother's side, and his mother was his great-great-grandmother came over on the second trip when the father went back. The assembly gave my wife Nori and me a nice tour of the Capitol and a nice lunch. I'm so appreciative of describing what had happened. He didn't know any of the details with the wreck of the Mexico. Another surprise came just this week, and it's from someone who's here, and she's a Limerick resident, and that's Ellen Donlan. You're the photographer here. She's recording this for the Limerick TV, I guess. Yeah, well, I guess you can't turn a camera around on yourself so the Limerick residents can see. But Ellen's been coming to these ceremonies. We have a jet plane overhead. Let me just pause for a moment. So she's been coming to these ceremonies, and she bought my book, and she let your son have that copy. He lives up in Biddeford, Maine. Did I say that right, Ellen? Get close enough?
Yeah.
Biddeford, Maine. He's doing a tour of the town by the local historical society. And he comes across this little postage stamp family grave area that's part of a park. And he sees a text there and an inscription that talks about a fellow named Noah Jordan, 29 years old. And Jordan died in Hampstead, is what it said. Of course, they meant Hempstead, because all of this is the town of Hempstead. And it says it was in the wreck of Mexico. So I go to my book and I find out on one of the page 39, I can't remember what page it is, another jet plane going over. He was the first mate of the ship Mexico. And he drowned or froze to death. It's hard to tell which one. I guess the drowning would come first. So he had a chance to freeze when he fell from the ship. So now, thanks to Ellen and her son, I can now get a family history of Noah Jordan, the first mate of the ship Mexico. And I expect there'll be more surprises to come, little things like that are being discovered. And I can't even tell you all because there have been several others of people who didn't know what happened to one of their relatives, but it turned out that they died in these wrecks. But those surprises would come thanks to people like you, like Ellen and others, who are determined to keep history alive. And that, I know they're like you because you're evidence of that right here today, keeping history alive. So thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
I'll add one thing, if I may, Art. Last year I spoke to Mike McCormick. Mike McCormick in the AOH is the national historian. In discussing the monument with him, he had expressed to me that this is probably the greatest single Irish tragedy in the history of the United States. And nobody questions Mike McCormick when it comes to Irish history. So if he said it, it's gospel. So.
I'll sing you a song, a soldier's song, with cheering, rousing chorus. As round the blazing fires we throng, the starry heavens over us, impatient for the coming fight, And as we wait the morning light, here in the silence of the night, we will chant a soldier's song. Soldiers are we, whose lives are pledged to our land. Some have come from the land beyond the wave, sworn to be free. No more our ancient sire land shall shelter the despot or the slave. Tonight we man our banner well, in Erin's cause come woe or well. Mid cannons roar and rifles peal, we will chant a soldier's song. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the ocean, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Good job.
Marianne, are you okay standing?
I'm good.
It was for lads, right?